Right then guys, it's PSL here and now. If you haven't been subscribed to me for too long, you'll have no idea what on earth I'll be referencing in this video, so I'll fill you in. On the 7th of February 2015, I started my What Matters Most series on Gran Turismo 4. In that series I found out how much of an individual and collective difference each component of the car made to a Honda NSX's lap time around Laguna Seca. Now looking back at those videos, which are some of the earliest I made, I really don't like them. I mean, they are honestly quite bad videos in all honesty. But despite that, I hate the idea of leaving one of my series not fully complete. And so that is why in this video I will answer 2 remaining questions from that series. In the second episode in my What Matters Most series, I looked into how much of a performance difference the tyres made. Long and short of it, a gargantuan one. There was a difference of 20.2 seconds a lap between the best and worst tyres, 10 seconds between the NSX's standard tyres and the best ones in the game, and even 6 seconds a lap between the hardest and softest compound of racing tyre. So I found out which tyre is best, and by how far, in a one lap situation. The question that still remains is which tyre is the best in an endurance racing scenario. Should you sacrifice the extra grip for longer stints and thus fewer pit stops? Well, that's what I'm here to find out by comparing the game's racing tyre compounds to find out which one is best for long distance racing. For this test, my B-Spec will be driving in every race to ensure consistency, and he will be set on pace 3 of 5, or what is called medium pace, for every lap of every race. Also, I didn't want too many unknowns to come into play, that's why we'll be heading back to Laguna Seca for the 200-mile endurance race there, and I'll be using the fully upgraded NSX seen in the last episode in my What Matters Most series. The winner is simple, it's whichever tyre compound does the 90 laps the fastest. So first up is the hardest racing tyre compound, which you would assume is the best one for endurance racing. Now the racing super hard tyres were found to be 4 seconds a lap quicker than the NSX's standard sports medium tyres, but 2.3 seconds a lap slower than the racing medium tyres. Anyway, the racing super hards were certainly durable, lasting 23 laps before needing to pit in for new ones, and meaning I only stopped 3 times all race. However, racy they were not. The main opponent in this race was a Celine S7, and we only passed it when he came into the pits on lap 21. However, a spin just before we entered the pits meant he jumped us and we had to pass him again. That meant that we didn't definitively take the lead of the race until the start of lap 43, and that's just less than halfway into the race. Anyway, the best lap times set from us were in the high to mid 1 minute 30s, and after a very durable run on only 4 sets of these tyres, we completed the 200 miles in first place with a total time of 2 hours, 19 minutes and 29 seconds. Next is onto the racing hard tyres, and the extra grip they had certainly helped to not be held up by the Celine for laps on end. This time my B-Spec moved into first place on only the 4th lap and pulled out enough of a lead so that when he did have to pit on lap 16, 7 laps earlier than the super hard tyres, he still came out in the lead of the race. The lap times were also around 2 seconds a lap ahead of the super hards, hitting consistent mid 1 minute 28. The pit stops were even quicker with these tyres compared with the super hards, as when we had the super hards, the crew was still refueling the car after the super hards had been fitted. And so because the hard tyres and all the other compounds did so fewer laps, that meant the pit stops are shorter, as that means we're not waiting for the car to be filled up with fuel. So actually the super hards had longer pit stops than all of the other tyre compounds. So the fast pit stop and lap times meant that despite having to stop 5 times in the race, 2 more than with the super hards, they finished the 200 miles in 2 hours 17 minutes and 22 seconds, 2 minutes and 7 seconds quicker than the super hards. Getting even softer now with the racing medium tyres. Now these had so much grip that we got into 5th place after just the first corner, and then into first at the start of lap 5. Later than the racing hards, but this time we had a Ford GT leading the race instead of the Celine. Now the lap times weren't a great deal faster than the racing hards lap times, mid to high 1 minute 27s. The mediums had an endurance of 12 laps, and so we had to pit 7 times in the race. Again, 2 more times than the next hardest compound. In the end, the 200 miles were completed in a time of 2 hours, 17 minutes and 35 seconds, only 13 seconds slower than the hards over the total distance. So needless to say, they were extremely close in total performance, but the hards have the slight edge over the mediums. This would suggest that now, the softer tyres get from the racing hards, the worse their endurance credentials are. That isn't the case, as the racing soft tyres were surprisingly remarkable in this race. With them on, we got into first on only lap 2 and were able to set 1 minute 26 lap times and very occasionally 1 minute 25s, meaning these tyres were 1.5 to 2 seconds a lap quicker than the racing mediums, and despite having to stop every 8 laps, there was almost no competition from the rest of the field, despite having to stop a massive 11 times in only a 90 lap race. We lapped the leader twice and finished, astonishingly, with the best time to date, 2 hours, 16 minutes and 39 seconds, a full 43 seconds, or roughly half a lap, ahead of the racing hard tyres. And I think that's got something to do with the massive performance gap between not only the softs and the hards, but also the softs and the mediums, because the softs were just so much quicker than the mediums, and I think that's why, overall, the time was noticeably quicker. Finally, we have the racing super soft tyres, or as the game calls them, racing qualifying tyres. The name blatantly says that these tyres should only be used for qualifying, but what happens if you stretch them out for 90 laps? Well, it's by no means advised, the long and short of it. It was pretty unsurprising, yet still impressive to find that I moved up to first from last by the end of the first lap. Again, what was impressive but not too surprising was finding out that I was setting lap times at the bottom end of the 1 minute 25s, so around a second a lap quicker than the soft tyres. However, this came at a cost, a 5 lap tyre life. Unsurprisingly, the tyres that are meant to be used only in qualifying lasted such a short time and meant I had to pit 17 times in only a 90 lap race. The race ended up okay though, as I won by over a lap with a total time of 2 hours, 18 minutes and 17 seconds. That's the second slowest time of the lot, but amazingly quicker than the racing super hards. So what this test found that is truly astonishing is that the tyres designed for endurance are the slowest in an endurance race and are just behind the qualifying spec tyres. I mean, overall the best tyres over the course of the 200-mile race at Laguna Seca were the racing soft tyres. In other words, the second softest ones in the game. It really is quite weird to see that result, but I think that worked out because it's just the sheer performance credentials that pulled the softs through. Lap times similar to that of the qualifying tyres, and much quicker than the mediums or any other harder tyre overcame the 11 pit stops they had to do. Also, one thing to remember is that with the super hards, I was stuck behind the Celine for almost half the race. So maybe on a clear track the super hards are better, but in a competitive racing environment, it's quite the opposite. So then, that's one question answered, one left to go. Now this one is a much simpler one, and that is, are the racing brakes any better than the standard brakes? Well, in the 4th episode in my What Matters Most series, I tried to find out. Well, in a 1 lap time trial event, I found only 1/10 of a second improvement from the standard brakes to the racing brakes, and that could well have just been from my driving and not the brakes themselves. So what I want to see is there any difference at all in the braking performance of the standard and racing brakes in this game? So to test the brakes to their absolute limits, I got the Range Rover Stormer concept car and fully upgraded it. So these brakes will try to stop a 2.5 ton car. If there's any difference between the two brakes, this test will surely find it. So on the left of the screen is the Range Rover with the standard brakes. On the right of the screen is the Range Rover with the brand new racing brakes that are meant to be better. So let's get this test underway then. So the Range Rover Stormer, one of the heaviest cars in the game, and now I've upgraded it, a beast of a car in a straight line. So as you can see, both the cars accelerating up to 160 miles an hour, which they'll achieve when they get to 1,000 meters. So they'll brake on the 1,000 meter line, and then we'll just see which one stops first. The normal brakes on the left, the racing brakes on the right, braking, and now we're going to see they've gone past 100 meters, and as you can see, the racing brakes have stopped just before the normal brakes. The normal brakes stopping in between 1,100 and 1,200 meters, the racing brakes just before that. So there you go, the racing brakes are slightly better then. Considering we started braking at the 1,000 meter mark, the standard brakes stopped the Range Rover Stormer in around 150 meters, with the racing brakes doing it in a slightly shorter distance, maybe around 10 to 15 meters earlier. So in short, are the racing brakes better? Well, yes, they clearly are, but what we saw earlier on in my What Matters Most series is that they have a pretty negligible impact on lap times. However, I have found out the racing brakes are around 10% better than the standard brakes under extreme circumstances. Let's not forget that, extreme circumstances. So yes, the racing brakes are better. Would you notice a difference? Probably not. And that's another underlying question that this series brought up, solved. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to leave a like, comment, and now, I know if you're one of my last around 800 subscribers, you'll have no idea what on earth this video was all about, but I hope you found it interesting regardless. Especially if you played Gran Turismo 4 back in the day like I did, because boy, when I was younger, I played the hell out of Gran Turismo 4, and because of that I do find it interesting, although kind of slightly pointless, to just find out the intricacies of this game. Whether anyone else found it interesting, I don't know, but as I said, I would hate to leave my What Matters Most series incomplete, despite how bad I think the first few videos of that are. Well, the first 10 videos to be exact. But anyway, now that those two mysteries have been solved, that just leaves one more from this series, and then I can finally bring my What Matters Most series to rest. And that's only about 18 months after I started it in the first place. So when will that final question be answered? A week today will be the last episode in my What Matters Most series, and it is quite an interesting video. This video is kind of boring and kind of nerdy in some aspects. The next one still is to a degree, but it is way more interesting, and it rights some wrongs from a previous video I made in this series, so yeah, be sure to stick around for that. So anyway guys, I'll see you next time. So I'll see you then.